Chapter 1769 Traitor of the Devil World. Chapter 1769 Traitor of the Devil World. Yu Sheng's face and name were not that familiar to people in the Nine Realms. He was much less well known than Gu Donglu. Most people in the Nine Realms only knew Yu Sheng as one of the many first-class cultivators following Yi Futian around, similar to Swordmaster of Lihan or Yaya. Even though Yu Sheng once displayed remarkable ability in God's Relic, he had been outshone by Yi Futian, and was less prominent among the several cultivators with perfect divine wheels trained by Yi Futian. Therefore, he made little impression on people outside of the Heavenly Mandate Academy. That was why the crowd didn't seem excited when Yu Sheng came onto the stage. Perhaps, he was just another man who was about to be trounced by the challengers from the Holy Land of Taichu. Many people cast their eyes on Yi Futian, and wondered why he still hadn't joined the fight yet. In their opinion, the cultivator from the Holy Land of Taichu, who excelled at the true will of waves of the war god, was so forceful that even Do Zhao with the eightfold will of the fighting god was not a match. It was beyond doubt that the Heaven Mandate Academy would only stand a chance if Yi Futian stepped up himself. Yu Sheng might not be able to turn the tide of battle. However, cultivators in the Heavenly Mandate Academy saw the arrangement in a different light. Everyone in the Heavenly Mandate Academy knew that Yu Sheng had the most special relationship with Yi Futian, and was almost like Yi Futian's shadow. Although he always kept things to himself and cultivated quietly, he was the only person in the Heavenly Mandate cottage that Do Zhao didn't dare to bother. Do Zhao liked to pick fights with other disciples in the cottage to practice and exchange ideas, but he never messed with Yu Sheng. Thus, many people were intrigued by what Yu Sheng could do. Yi Futian must send Yu Sheng with a specific intention in mind. Did he believe that Yu Sheng was capable of defeating the opponent? They could only wait and see. Yu Sheng stepped forward and went into the battlefield high in the sky. The man from the Holy Land of Taichu was still there, waiting to fight with Yu Sheng. Despite being the most renowned academy in the Divine Prefecture, the Holy Land of Taichu had a limited number of prodigies. In addition, this man was already the second best among all the lower Renhuangs, who came to the Heavenly Mandate Academy this time. They were not in their home ground after all. The man aimed to wipe the floor with the Heavenly Mandate Academy by crushing their cultivators with perfect divine wheels, and leaving them no chance to redeem themselves. This man from the Holy Land of Taichu was almost unrivaled at the first level of the lower Renhuang Plain, and possessed enough strength to win a resounding victory over the cultivators with perfect divine wheels in the Heavenly Mandate Academy. Everyone focuses their attention on Yu Sheng and the man from the Holy Land of Taichu. The Heavenly Mandate Academy would truly spoil their reputation if they lost again. They were beaten by the Holy Land of Taichu 3 times in a row. People surely expected that the Heavenly Mandate Academy selected the best cultivator at this level for the next match to end the losing streak. Your disciples can still stay here as they wish after the Holy Land of Taichu installed a program in the Heavenly Mandate Academy. Moreover, we will give priority to them, and even send them to cultivate in the Divine Prefecture. Why do you have to be so stubborn? The white-robed man from the Holy Land of Taichu said in a deadpan tone. It would be ideal for the Holy Land of Taichu to conquer and replace the Heavenly Mandate Academy smoothly. They would be very happy to coerce the talented cultivators in the Heavenly Mandate Academy into obedience and bring them under control. Yi Futian heard him, but didn't respond. It was pointless to argue with him. Yi Futian had no other choice but to fight for their survival. A man was sitting in an empty tavern in Heavenly Mandate City and drinking alone. Since everyone went to the Heavenly Mandate Academy to watch the battle, the rest of Heavenly Mandate City was especially quiet right now. The neighborhood this tavern located in was almost deserted. However, the waiter in the tavern was still deferential and attentive to the sole customer. He stood in the corner and stared at the battlefield far away, while occasionally glanced at the man who was dressed in black and drinking alone. He was the Devil General, who single-handedly halted the entire Dark Army of Hell, left an everlasting impression on everyone in Heavenly Mandate City. He destroyed the cultivators from the Fate World and slaughtered many Renhuangs. Not only the Dark Army couldn't contend with him, the King of Hell had to invite him for drinks. What a formidable person he was. Nevertheless, he was sitting in the tavern and drinking quietly at the moment. No one could tell how powerful and frightening he was if not for his stately bearing. While drinking, Mei Ting was also watching everything happening on the battlefield in the Heavenly Mandate Academy. His divine consciousness already covered the entire area. He slowed down and sipped the wine unhurriedly when he saw Yu Sheng walking forward. In a sense, Yu Sheng was the descendant of the legend of the Devil World. Mei Ting didn't know about Yu Sheng's existence in the past. Thus, he stayed in Heavenly Mandate City for days specifically to wait and see how high Yu Sheng had achieved. Obviously, Mei Ting had heard a lot of stories about the legend. That man was cold-blooded, while capable of feeling pity for the human sufferings at the same time. He betrayed the Devil World, yet was worshipped by countless people all the same, including Mei Ting. Besides, he truly lived up to his reputation as the traitor of the Devil World. He didn't send his son back to the Devil World, even when he knew that his offsprings would always be revered in the Devil World, no matter what he did. His son remained in the Void Realm, one of the territories of the Divine Prefecture. Mei Ting wouldn't know about Yu Sheng if he didn't accidentally find his personal mount, who happened to meet Yu Sheng in the past. Perhaps no one else knew about Yu Sheng anyway. Mei Ting brought his thoughts back to the present and continued to watch the battlefield. Two people stood high up in the air above the Heavenly Mandate Academy. Burly and rugged, Yu Sheng was a head taller than his opponent. The great path transformed into a vast ocean, roaring and rolling, as the man from the holy land of Taichu unleashed the true will of waves of the war god. In spite of the tremendous force he generated, he saw that Yu Sheng, who was on the other side, remained standing and staring at him coldly, as if he was the only target in Yu Sheng's eyes. Sima Xiao came from a distinguished family and was the direct disciple of a war god in the holy land of Taichu. He comprehended the essence of the true will of waves of the war god and was entrusted with the mission to promote the holy land of Taichu in the lower worlds. He was confident that no one in the Void Realm could contend with him. How would he stay competitive if he couldn't remain unmatched in the isolated Void Realm? Nevertheless, Sima Xiao was unnerved when he met Yu Sheng's unwavering stare. He immediately felt a sense of pressure in the face of Yu Sheng. This kind of pressure brought by Yu Sheng did not exist when he was confronting Do Zhao before. He figured that Yu Sheng was an even better cultivator than Do Zhao. However, it also meant that the Heavenly Mandate Academy indeed deployed the strongest fighter they had at this level, just like what Sima Xiao expected. The true will of waves of the war god became more and more powerful like a fierce storm. The golden waves surged and roared toward Yu Sheng. At the moment, Yu Sheng was wrapped in demonic might. A terrifying rush of energy burst out of his body before a frightening whirlpool appeared in front of him. The whirlpool was extremely dark and looked very similar to a black hole or a giant demonic eye. It appeared that it could almost swallow the worldly great path. The true will of waves of the war god storming toward Yu Sheng was entirely gobbled up by the swirling black hole and vanished from sight. Of course, Yu Sheng also had the perfect divine wheel. It was the divine wheel of the demonic eyes. Streams of dark, demonic air current became visible in the sky. Yu Sheng devoured all of the light and turned the entire battlefield into a scary dark whirlpool. The sky changed color and blended in the demonic world. A bolt of exceptionally domineering demonic chi burst from Yu Sheng's body. All the cultivators watching the fight were taken by surprise. Yu Sheng seemed to be very powerful. Sima Xiao raised his eyebrows. The divine wheel of the great path in his body swelled and released the golden divine wheel. The true will of waves of the war god, more and more intense, hurtled toward Yu Sheng like raging waves crashing onto rocks. Bang! A gigantic demonic shadow took shape like a statue of a devil. Yu Sheng seemed even heftier. Many demonic eyes with the power to consume everything started to emerge on the demonic shadow. In addition to that, the demonic eyes also appeared on Yu Sheng's body. Before long, the demonic eyes formed a wall in front of Yu Sheng and absorbed all the power of the great path generated by Sima Xiao. Sima Xiao couldn't use his divine wheel to subdue his opponent this time. It was apparent that he was not capable of overpowering Yu Sheng's divine wheel. Sima Xiao's arm rotated slightly, and the true will of waves of the war god converged on it. He stepped forward and launched the storm of the great path. Like a bolt of golden lightning, he streaked across the sky toward Yu Sheng's body and punched him with tremendous momentum. Waves of the great path rose and pounded against Yu Sheng, seeking to smash his defense. Bang! Yu Sheng moved forward as well. His forceful step made the sky tremble. He struck with his fist just like Sima Xiao. The demonic eyes discharged monstrous demonic might. The dark-colored fist will charged forward with great penetrating power and dashed against the incoming waves. Bang! With a dull thudding sound, the storm rushed off in all directions. The cultivators in the Runhuang plain standing around had to exert their strength to protect themselves from the storm. Still, many people watching the flight were blasted away. It was not difficult to imagine how high-powered the storm was. Countless people stared at the sky and noticed the giant demonic shadow was still towering over everything else. Sima Xiao was flung away this time and couldn't balance himself until miles away. Many people felt their hearts pounding in the chests. How could Yu Sheng from the Heavenly Mandate Academy be so powerful? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 1770 The Famous Strike. Chapter 1770 The Famous Strike. Sima Xiao defeated both Yaya and Dou Zhao earlier this day and showed off the magnificent art of supreme attack to people in the Heavenly Mandate Academy. His true will of Waves of the War God was excellent at both offense and defense. The terrifying destructive power of the Waves of the War God could damage the opponent's internal organs and wipe out the spiritual soul from afar. It also had the uncanny defensive ability that could weaken the attack from his opponent until it was no longer a threat. Dou Zhao from the Dou tribe had reached his limit when he activated the eightfold will of the fighting god, but he was still crushed by Sima Xiao during their match. At that time, the Holy Land of Taichu had won all 3 fights and made everyone in the field watching the battle believe that the Heavenly Mandate Academy had lost all hope to turn the tide and redeem themselves. Since Yi Futian already advanced to the Divine Wheel Second Order, no one in the Divine Wheel First Order from the Heavenly Mandate Academy could be a match for Sima Xiao. Sima Xiao stood upright with an unconquerable pride after he clobbered Dou Zhao. However, Yu Sheng came out of nowhere and blasted Sima Xiao away with one punch, just when he was glowing. One could well imagine what an incredible shock it was to the people watching the fight. It turned out that cultivators from the Holy Land of Taichu could still be defeated. How could Yu Sheng, someone who was virtually unknown to people outside of the Heaven Mandate Academy, be so powerful? It appeared that his direct attack power was even more striking than Dou Zhao, the heir of the Dou tribe. On top of that, Yu Sheng's domineering divine wheel of the demonic eyes did not simply swallow the great path. It absorbed and incorporated the energy from Sima Zhao's attack before firing back at him altogether. The demonic waves it created at that moment were no different from Sima Zhao's waves of the war god. What staggered the crowd the most was that the demonic waves of the war god generated by Yu Sheng seemed even more potent than Sima Zhao's true will of waves of the war god. Otherwise, how would it be possible for Yu Sheng to knock Sima Xiao over? This kind of power was beyond words. Disciples in the Heavenly Mandate Academy clenched their fists tightly and were overwhelmed by both nervousness and excitement. Even cultivators in the Runhuang plain were staring intently at the battlefield with their stomachs in knots. Dou Zhao had been beaten by Yu Sheng before and certainly had first-hand knowledge of Yu Sheng's ability. He was thrilled to see Yu Sheng finally join the battle. Sima Xiao was stupefied by Yu Sheng as well. He struggled to maintain balance and could feel the energy tumbling in his body. He was astounded that Yu Sheng could turn his own strength against him. He couldn't launch any more attack on Yu Sheng for the fear that his power would be soaked up by Yu Sheng's demonic eyes again and hurled back at himself. In the meantime, Sima Zhao's desire to fight also intensified. Strong-willed and unyielding, he stepped forward once again, as if he was not disheartened by the blow moments ago. How could a person like him weaken his determination for a temporary setback? He was not truly defeated yet. It seemed like the true will of waves in the sky suddenly came to a standstill. The true will of waves of the war god didn't strike at Yu Sheng against for fear of being absorbed once more. Sima Xiao waved his arms and triggered the divine wheel. A massive golden pattern became visible around him. Like a golden pool of water, it rippled in all directions with Sima Xiao's body at the center and spread to the entire sky. The air vibrated violently as the true will of waves of the war god that came to rest just now suddenly became stronger. Sima Xiao lifted his foot and took a step forward. The invisible, terrifying power of the divine wheel of the great path swept toward Yu Sheng's body. The sky was almost blown into pieces following a loud booming sound. Sima Xiao wanted to use the power of his golden divine wheel to crush Yu Sheng's divine wheel. Nevertheless, Yu Sheng clenched his fists swiftly and conjured up countless demonic eyes on the demon's body. But that was not all. Millions of demonic eyes also became visible everywhere, both in the sky and on the ground. As if the vast battlefield was transformed into a demonic world just now. Forming the divine wheel was the symbol of advancing to the Runhuang plane. The cultivator had to integrate his soul with the worldly great path and infuse his comprehension of the great path into his life spirit to develop his divine wheel of the great path. Different cultivators could generate completely different divine wheels due to distinctions in their life spirits, souls, and their comprehension of the great path. Even divine wheels in the same order didn't possess the same amount of power. Sima Zhao's divine wheel combined the great path of water and Gingjin, and was even integrated with the true will of waves of the war god. With such a perfect and extremely potent divine wheel, no wonder Sima Xiao wanted to bring Yu Sheng to his knees straight away. Unfortunately, he only realized now that he didn't have any advantage over Yu Sheng in terms of the divine wheel. Moreover, his divine wheel was subdued by Yu Sheng's. The countless demonic eyes that appeared in the sky constructed a massive demonic net that surrounded the entire battlefield and consumed everything within, including the law power. This kind of divine will was truly masterful and dominating. Sima Xiao had always been an arrogant person who was extremely proud of his divine wheel. He was certain that his divine wheel of the great path was a cut above all of his peers. It would become even better when he advanced to higher levels and gained a deeper understanding of the great path. Nonetheless, the divine wheel that brought him great pride was humbled by a cultivator from the Heavenly Mandate Academy in the Heavenly Mandate realm. Bang! Yu Sheng also walked a few steps forward. It was like he stamped on Sima Zhao's heart with absolute supremacy and mastery. Sima Xiao looked into Yu Sheng's eyes and felt that Yu Sheng was more like a demonic god than a flesh and blood human. That pair of eyes trapped Sima Xiao in an illusion of thousands of demons worshipping their god. As if Yu Sheng was born to rule the devils. The vast space transformed into a frightening whirlpool where innumerable demonic eyes of the great path were spinning around in a frenzy and devouring the power within. Even cultivators from the Holy Land of Taichu were unsettled by the scene. They were perceptive, astute cultivators, at an exceptionally high level, and certainly understood the situation. This was different from the previous matches. Sima Xiao got the upper hand over Yaya and Do Zhao, but his divine wheel was overpowered this time. At this moment, Sima Xiao had less vigor as well as an inferior divine wheel. The Holy Land of Taichu might lose this match. A strange expression briefly crossed the face of the cultivator dressed in a white robe as he frowned slightly. Unlike people in the Void Realm, he thoroughly understood how powerful Sima Xiao was. Sima Xiao was a remarkable cultivator even in the Holy Land of Taichu, and was entrusted with the mission to promote the Holy Land of Taichu in the Void Realm. He was pretty confident that not only would Sima Xiao not lose, he could also demolish the cultivators with so-called perfect divine wheels in the Heavenly Mandate Academy. Nevertheless, his confidence had been fraying at the edges ever since Yu Sheng stepped out. He was especially demoralized now, since Yu Sheng had turned the tide. Yu Sheng made a move under the white-robed man's watch. He leaped across the battlefield in one step and landed right in front of Sima Xiao. He threw a punch straight ahead just like what Sima Xiao did. It was plain and simple with dominating power. The divine wheel was set in motion, and the storm surged from the demonic eyes along with the fist will. A scary, black whirlpool appeared in front of Yu Sheng's fist. Facing the direct attack from Yu Sheng, Sima Xiao knew he couldn't back off. Therefore he responded with a punch as well. With the maximum true will of waves of the war god, the golden waves charged ahead and shattered the space. It was another head-on clash that seemed to be overly basic. But the fist was the most effective weapon, that contained the greatest strength. Bang! There was not any light screen expanding in all directions like the last time. Everything was annihilated when the two fists came into collision. Nonetheless, Yusheng was still moving forward. His fist drilled through the horrifying waves of the Great Path, and cleared a path with absolute authority. Bang! 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 The true will of waves of the war god, that could weaken the incoming attack, disintegrated into pieces, and hit on Sima Zhao's body. It was proven that nothing was invincible in the face of absolute power. One punch could destroy the most superb defense. The light rune of the Great Path of Space came into view. Sima Zhao's body sunk into the void, and was about to fade away. However, Yusheng's fist will penetrated the void and thrust into the passageway directly. Sima Zhao's body reappeared in someplace far away. But the fist will caught up with Sima Zhao, and crushed his defense. Once again, Sima Zhao was blasted away. Blood spurted out of his mouth as his internal organs were badly damaged. It seemed quite similar to what happened to Do Zhao before. As though Yusheng intentionally chose to beat Sima Zhao with the same move Sima Zhao used on Do Zhao. It even achieved the same results. Yusheng pulled back his fist after Sima Zhao was sent flying. The demonic might was still rolling in the sky. Everyone raised their heads, and looked at the strapping man standing in the void. How wild, fierce, and overbearing he was. His image burned in everybody's memory. Years later, people in the Heavenly Mandate realm still regarded this fight as the one that made Yusheng's name. Yusheng rose to fame with one strike. He blasted away the genius from the Holy Land of Taichu, and accomplished something thought to be impossible by people in the Heavenly Mandate realm. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Inside that tavern at Heavenly Mandate City, Meiting was still sitting there quietly drinking. Inside that tavern at Heavenly Mandate City, Meiting was still sitting there quietly drinking. But what had just taken place also appeared in his divine consciousness. No wonder he was the one who possessed the noblest bloodline in the devil world. A natural-born demon lord, who could conquer everything in this world. If he grew up in the devil world, perhaps he would have been stronger still. Yusheng stood in the battlefield high above the sky. His dark demonic eyes swept toward the cultivators from Holy Land of Taichu. He declared with the most domineering attitude that even those from the Holy Land of Divine Prefecture were not invincible. They could still be crushed by the strongest of them all. Next, Yusheng spoke. His voice was incredibly domineering and full of contempt. It was as if, in his eyes, he had never taken the cultivators of the Holy Land of Taichu into consideration. To him, they were just the next ones. This was completely contradictory to the situation that had occurred just now. It seemed to be a total reversal. All around the Heavenly Mandate Academy, there was an exceptional quietude. Countless cultivators watched what was playing out in front of them silently, and many felt a surging excitement, especially the disciples of the Heavenly Mandate Academy. Losing the previous 3 battles had been a tremendous blow to them, and now they could felt blood boiling in their veins. Next, the Holy Land of Taichu was known as the Holy Land of Preaching in Divine Prefecture. It had come to provoke the cultivators of the Heavenly Mandate Academy to show its contempt, intending to crush the academy beneath its feet. Now that Sima Zhao had been defeated, who else could defeat Yusheng in this realm? Countless many were staring in the direction of the Holy Land of Taichu. They were also curious to see if stronger men than Sima Zhao would step up from the Holy Land of Taichu. But at this time, the reality was clear as day to those from the Holy Land of Taichu. They knew for a fact that for the likes of Sima Zhao to be so forcibly crushed, that there would be no one in this realm who could possibly hope to suppress Yusheng. You go! The old man in white looked at the swordsman, who was the first to make a move. He was the one who had defeated Xiang Mang. This cultivator was unparalleled in speed. His expertise lay in the great path of wind, and he had blended that into the great path of tearing swords. Not only was he invincible, but his speed was extremely fast, just like his sword. Everyone understood that they intend to win with speed. Yu Sheng's strength was second to none, but his speed was bound to be much slower. That Ren Huang walked out. A murderous sword intent surrounded him, as a terrible storm blew up between heaven and earth. Many afterimages appeared in different directions, as if he was everywhere at the same time. Yu Sheng glanced at the opponent with cold indifference, and the divine wheel of the demonic eyes once again appeared in this space. Countless vortices of the demonic eyes instantly swallowed up the way of heaven and earth, covering the sky. He raised his arms and stretched his hands forward. In the next moment, a terrifying hurricane seemed to appear in his palms. And it was not only in his palms, but that huge shadow of the demon god and the demonic eyes between the heaven and the earth had both turned into one terrible vortex, swallowing the power of the great path within this space. Everyone saw that the afterimages of that Ren Huang seemed to be distorted, giving the impression that the power of the great path was affected, and that it had lost the smooth flow that it previously had when it was integrated into the space. Suppression of the great path. Everyone's hearts were beating fast. This overbearing divine wheel, and this dominant will of the great path, had directly smashed the opponent without any fancy tricks. No matter how fast the speed, once suppressed by the great path, the truth was revealed. The same perfect divine will had been suppressed equally. The impression was that Yu Sheng had forged an absolute demonic space with his power of the great path. It was a world in which he ruled, and anyone who confronted him within this world would most certainly be suppressed by him. The sword will flashed in different directions, and the other seemed to know that he couldn't afford to wait any longer, or his great path would be suppressed even more, and then there would be no chance for him at all. In an instant, infinite sword light appeared around Yu Sheng, tearing the void where he stood. Bang! He stepped forward the moment the sword light exploded. His retracted arms slammed forward, as if he had no specific target, but to slam them into the void. When he blasted with his punch, the space in front of him seemed to freeze suddenly. The great path was suppressed, as all the afterimages stopped moving, and those swords seemed unable to advance. Boom! The fist will pierced through the void. Dark fist aurora swept out. Immediately after, everyone saw a figure flew out upside down. The body was tilted, arched, and it was blown out. There was a cracking sound that came from inside the body. It was as if all his internal organs were shattered, and cracks also appeared in his divine wheel. When they saw what had happened, a cultivator from the holy land of Taichu came forward to catch him in the fall. After the opponent stopped falling, his body trembled as he spat out a mouthful of blood. All his clothes were reddened, and his breath was weakened instantaneously to the extreme. A Ren Huang was debilitated so suddenly, no longer the audacious individual he was before. Suppressing the great path, the power of the great path. The cultivators from the holy land of Taichu stared in Yu Sheng's direction. The two blended into his fist will, and it was another simple strike. There was no technique to speak of, only absolute power. It was as if the simplest way for Yu Sheng was also the strongest. No matter what they did, he was still invincible. Before, even Sima Zhao's true will of waves was pierced by Yu Sheng, and he was seriously injured. It was only conceivable that this swordsman, without the weakening and blocking of the great path, to be blasted like this by Yu Sheng's fist. He was probably only half alive now. Across a long distance, many felt the misery experienced by that Ren Huang. This strike was seriously horrific. No one could imagine the outcome of being on the receiving end of such a strike. Next, Yu Sheng continued. His indifferent voice still gave everyone who heard it a feeling of extreme aggression. There was silence again, very quiet. This man, with his own power, had completely kept the holy land of Taichu in check. Two genius talents from the holy land of Taichu were blasted out, with a single strike in succession. The holy land of Taichu had come to trample on the Heavenly Mandate Academy to prove their superiority. But now they were trampled mercilessly by Yu Sheng. Seeing the silence coming from the holy land of Taichu, an old man in the direction of the Heavenly Mandate Academy spoke. Aren't you the holy land for preaching from divine prefecture of the upper worlds? With such a lofty title, you have invaded the Heavenly Mandate Academy, as if it was the academy who should be honored. Now you won't just have one or two people who could come out in battle, do you? So, It seems that the Holy Land of Taichu came here prepared and sent the strongest among you right away to the field. You don't have anyone else that is good? Someone else spoke again. All these voices sounded extremely exhilarating at this moment. The feeling of unjust persecution was being released. The truth was that it wasn't because there was no one from the Holy Land of Taichu. They were fully prepared this time and brought a lot of cultivators with them. However, Sima Xiao was indeed the topmost cultivator from of the lower worlds. At least in this realm, no one could surpass him. However, since he was defeated by Yu Sheng, there was indeed no one else they had who could come out in battle. At this time, the cultivator in white said, "The Heavenly Mandate Academy is worthy of being the most prestigious preaching place in the Void Realm today, with impressive talents. Just as I thought, if it can be unified with the Holy Land of Taichu, there are bound to be more dazzling figures that will emerge. Are you still fighting?" Yi Futian interrupted, speaking loud and clear, which shocked the cultivator in white as his eyes swept toward the direction where Yi Futian was. "Everyone knows the purpose of your coming, so you don't need to bother making it pretty. The Holy Land of Taichu from the Divine Prefecture cannot even suppress the cultivator of the Heavenly Mandate Academy of the lower worlds. What are you good for?" Yi Futian continued. "No matter how strong you are in Divine Prefecture, if you would have minded your business in Divine Prefecture and let our academy preach in the Heavenly Mandate realm, we would not have had to interfere with one another. However, if you came here to trample on our academy simply because you are from Divine Prefecture, your current performance is a big disappointment. Previously you won 3 times. If my guess is right, it's because you had a cultivator who was the first order of the Divine Wheel. I just wanted the disciples of the academy to feel that even your strongest was only SOSO. I think you should know by now that in the following battles, as long as you continue to face Yu Sheng, you will lose every single battle in this realm. I will give the Holy Land of Taichu another chance. Yu Sheng will not participate in the next battle, so you can pick another person. We will have someone other than Yu Sheng respond," Yi Futian said, as if to give the Holy Land of Taichu a chance to redeem itself. After all, as long as Yu Sheng was around, they had no chance but to be fully suppressed in this realm. The cultivators in white from the Holy Land looked intently at Yi Futian. Previously, they had the absolute advantage, but now they were in a passive position. Moreover, their previous aggressive attitude was in sharp contrast to their current state. Because they had lost. Therefore, they couldn't afford to lose anymore. He turned his head, and his gaze fell on someone whose cultivation was also very powerful. Although this man was not quite up to the level of Sima Xiao, he was definitely a top figure. That Ren Huang understood what he meant and stepped out. In this battle he had to win. As this man stepped forward, he exuded a shocking aura. Yu Sheng took a look at him, and returned to the location occupied by the Heavenly Mandate Academy, and settled behind Yi Futian. Yi Futian's attention was focused on a man in white, who was handsome and extraordinary. "Third senior brother, may we trouble you to respond in this battle?" Yi Futian asked. Now, Gu Donglu was already well established in the Renhuang realm, and was even hitting the second order of Renhuang realm. There was no doubt about his combat effectiveness. The inheritance from the Demon Emperor, along with the inheritance from Gu Tianxing, he had gathered all the resources of the origin from the demon realm. No problem. Obviously, Gu Donglu would not refuse. He also had a mind to step into the battle, but Yi Futian seemed to want to test some other people first. In other words, it was precisely for this moment that he had allowed the Holy Land of Taichu to showcase their strength first. After all, the preaching Holy Land from Divine Prefecture was indeed powerful. But after this, he wanted everyone in the 9 realms to know that the principalities from Divine Prefecture were not unbeatable. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1772 Unleash the Sword. Chapter 1772 Unleash the Sword. The two figures stood opposite each other, and this was their 6th battle. Before this, the Heavenly Mandate Academy and the Holy Land of Taichu had each lost 2 battles. Therefore, this battle was the key to victory. Whoever lost the battle would be completely at a disadvantage in terms of future momentum. The celestial light lingered upon Gu Donglio's body. His white robe fluttered as he stood there like a rebellious deity, unrestrained and willful. Above Gu Dongliu, an uncommon sight was forming. The great path above the firmament roared, and a boundless giant pattern appeared, sheltering the sky and the sun. As the pattern swallowed up the power of the great path, it became ever clearer, like a divine matrix. The 9 seals of spiritual power revolved above this divine matrix, and each seal of the ancient world seemed to contain the horrific power of the great path, from which the most brilliant divine light exploded. Afterward, there were some roars from some ancient giant beasts. Above the divine matrix, thousands of fierce beasts appeared. Their roars were enough to shatter the heavens. In a turn of the mind, the sky changed color, and a might oppressed the heavens. Gu Donglu understood Yi Futian's intention. The previous 3 battles were just an opportunity for a trial. At the same time, he hoped to use this fight to stimulate the Heavenly Mandate Academy, and even the cultivators from the 9 realms, to jumpstart their fighting spirit by showing them the power of the Holy Land of Taichu. However, the real message was that even though the Holy Land of Taichu was strong, it could be defeated. The same was true for those principalities from the Divine Prefecture. No matter where they came from, as long as they themselves were strong enough, they could resist these foreign invaders and even triumph over them. People in the Void Realm need not cave in to any outside force. Therefore, Gu Donglu immediately exploded with his most horrific ability, totally suppressing this space. The strong aura of the great path from that cultivator of the Holy Land of Taichu roared, but was suppressed right away. The roaring beasts above the divine matrix suppressed the heavens. Their roars were enough to shatter everyone's divine spirits. The 9 seals of spiritual powers descended and resonated with the great path, as well as the heaven and the earth. All powers were converged upon the divine matrix, and in an instant, that power erupted to its fullest. Buzz! Gu Donglu took a step forward, carrying endless divine light with him. He unleashed one strike to the Runhuang from the Holy Land of Taichu with his pal. Its power was great enough to suppress the heavens. 9 seals of spiritual power surrounded Gu Donglu, who at this moment burst out with infinite celestial light behind him, and countless demonic beasts roared in a symphony. The power of this one palm strike was simply formidable without question. The Runhuang from the Holy Land of Taichu looked in front of him, and the man who was coming at him looked like a real deity, one with bad intentions. Both of his hands were forming a seal, and both hands struck hard, as if they were pushing against mountains and oceans, to block those giant palm prints blasting toward him. In an instant, the celestial light descended, and a violent rumbling sound came out. The powerful palm strike continued to shatter everything underneath that celestial light. Gu Donglu continued his downward momentum, destroying everything in his path. The momentum that continued as he moved forward did not weaken, but was getting stronger and stronger, until it blasted right in front of the opponent. Bang! Accompanied by a loud boom, the Runhuang of the Holy Land of Taichu felt as if his body had been subjected to countless shock waves. It seemed that many ancient behemoths had run through him, and it was like all the forces of heaven had smashed down at the same time. His body was slammed down from the void. With a loud bang, his body was shocked into the ground. The ground had sunken as cracks started to appear, and there was a human-shaped pit when the palm strike had sent him into the ground. Gu Donglu retracted his hands, and the celestial shadow returned to its place. Once again, that free-spirited man with white hair stood there with his long hair flying in the wind, extremely at ease. Although he didn't know much about the cultivator from the Holy Land of Taichu, the opponent had no chance to make his move. There was no doubt that Gu Donglio's strike was powerful beyond doubt. That one palm strike was simply stunning. That incredible figure was too brilliant to behold. Many couldn't help but exclaim to themselves that no wonder this was the heir of Gu Tianxing, and now the sole inheritor of the celestial gate of vast heaven. The 3rd senior brother's combat effectiveness is getting stronger again, Yi Futian said. Presumably, the 3rd senior brother's power to comprehend the inheritance was getting deeper, and his potential was gradually released. Back then, in the Origin Mountains in the Demon Realm, the power that Gu Donglu inherited was much too frightening to contemplate. Furthermore, his own realm was already at the peak of Divine Will First Order, not too far behind the Second Order. Therefore, he was successful with a single strike. The celestial light dissipated, but Gu Donglio's temperament still felt elusive. In fact, he had actually employed extreme force, and without reservation, all to achieve the one-strike, one-kill effect that Yi Futian wanted. This was so that everyone could see for themselves that those who came from the Holy Land of Divine Prefecture could be trampled just like the others. No one could say that Yu Sheng's first battle was an isolated instance, and Yu Sheng's personal strength was an anomaly. Because just now, Gu Donglu had done the same at this moment. It was enough to make everyone realize that the power now gathered at the current regime of the Heavenly Mandate Academy was not any less than those top invading powers, even compared with the preaching power from the Divine Prefecture. They were using actions to declare that this generation of the Heavenly Mandate Academy would represent the future of the Heavenly Mandate Realm, and even very possibly the future of the entire 3,000 realms of the Great Path. In due course, they would be the equal of any other top forces from the outer realms. The impact of this battle, if no other major events were intervening in the future, would have a long-lasting effect. The reputation of the Heavenly Mandate Academy would also reach a more frightening height. Gu Donglu looked at the people from the Holy Land of Taichu and said, "The Heavenly Mandate Academy is now more than just the Heavenly Mandate Academy, but also represents the entire Heavenly Mandate realm. We have also formed alliances with many top forces in other realms, hoping to produce more outstanding cultivators in this land. The Heavenly Mandate Academy will never hold back better conditions for cultivation to the world. So if the Holy Land of Taichu is intending on preaching to the world, you are welcome to establish a place elsewhere in the Heavenly Mandate realm, instead of using these despicable means to rob the others of the resources for your use. It isn't something a true preaching principality should be doing." After having said all that, Gu Donglu walked back. The people from the Holy Land of Taichu fell silent, and many of them had a terrible look on their faces. Sima Xiao, the strongest in this realm, had already lost to Yu Sheng. Now that Gu Donglu had defeated them again, which rendered the previous 3 victories completely meaningless. This meant that the Heavenly Mandate Academy had not exerted all their strength before, but the Holy Land of Taichu had given their all. Therefore, no one would care about the previous 3 victories at all. This kind of contrast made it even easier for people to remember that when the Holy Land of Taichu had won all 3 battles before, their stance was so high, and their words were so haughty. In the following battle, their menacing attitude was slammed from the high of highs into the abyss. Now the consensus was that the Holy Land of Taichu was completely defeated. Under such circumstances, how could the Holy Land of Taichu continue with their proposal to preach within the Heavenly Mandate realm? Everything that happened before was like a joke now. However, it was clear that the Holy Land of Taichu would not give up easily this time. Even if they didn't end up preaching, they would never allow their name to be trampled by anyone, especially not by the preaching force that they had openly despised. If this news were to get back to the Divine Prefecture, their reputation would be severely damaged by this shameful stain. Below, the people from Song Imperial City watched everything with an interested look. They could have never imagined that the true strength of the Heavenly Mandate Academy would surpass their expectations so much. They thought it would be a hardcore crushing duel in which the Holy Land of Taichu would trample the Heavenly Mandate Academy to death. Who could have thought that Yu Sheng and Gu Donglu, who answered the battle calls, were so powerful that they crushed the Ran Huang of the Holy Land of Taichu with such brilliant aggression? Therefore, the Holy Land of Taichu was now in an extremely passive position. It seems that his sword is going to be unsheathed after all, the old man from Song Imperial City secretly remarked to himself. The woman next to him also looked at the cultivators from the Holy Land of Taichu. They were all top principalities in the Divine Prefecture, and knew how strong the Holy Land of Taichu was. The people from the Holy Land of Taichu did not exaggerate, and they were even stronger than they had presented themselves. Their disciples spread all over the Divine Prefecture, and they had produced a lot of people with great abilities. Several leaders in the Holy Land of Taichu were also powerful existents themselves. In Divine Prefecture, those ancient forces that had been around for countless years had long histories. The strongest among them was not any less than those top figures directly under the Great Emperor, such as the Lord of the Underworld and the Devil General Mei Ting. They were definitely right up there in terms of their strength, while some might even be stronger. However, these people generally would not have come to the Void Realm in person. Under such circumstances, Mu Chinka, the heir of Taichu sparring grounds, had no choice but to show his sword. Otherwise, the Holy Land of Taichu could only leave with their tail between their legs. Psst! At this moment, a sharp and piercing sound was heard, and in the next moment, an infinite sword will roiled and moved. It was as if a sword had been unsheathed. At this moment, many people felt a tightness in their bodies. Between the Heavenly Mandate Academy and the Holy Land of Taichu, a sword suddenly appeared above the void. This sword was suspended there, clamoring loudly. Its sword will was sharp to the extreme. Above the sky, the sword will tossed and roared, and another sword gathered and emerged. It appeared next to the sword that had just appeared, so the two swords were suspended in the air together, ringing loudly. Afterward, the third sword, the fourth sword appeared until all 9 swords were standing side by side. That sword will was everywhere. It seemed as if the battlefield was completely controlled by it. Any cultivators who enter into this sword would most certainly be crushed by it. At this time, in the direction of the Holy Land of Taichu, someone stepped out. This man was dressed in a long blue robe, and he cut a handsome figure as he was tall and slender. He stepped directly onto the 9 swords and stood there quietly with the swords underneath his feet. Mu Chinka. Some people from the Divine Prefecture remarked to themselves when they saw him. As expected, Mu Chinka was making his move now. Previously, many had speculated whether Mu Chinka would wield his sword this time. If the performance of the Holy Land of Taichu was strong enough, there was obviously no need for Mu Chinka to use his sword. But the Holy Land of Taichu was suppressed so completely in the battles that took place. Even though they still had many more cultivators in all 3 realms of the Lower Renhuang who could battle, but at this moment, it no longer made any sense for them to do so. A win or two was totally meaningless now. What they needed was an absolutely powerful existence. It's true that the Holy Land of Taichu underestimated the cultivators of the Heavenly Mandate Academy, but the Holy Land of Taichu that you see is not the real Holy Land of Taichu either. My name is Mu Chinka, one of the cultivators from the Holy Land of Taichu, Divine Will Second Order, an expert in swords. I am honored to be here today, and would like the opportunity to exchange with all the Lower Renhuang from the Heavenly Mandate Academy. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. One man had challenged all the lower-level Renhuangs of the Heavenly Mandate Academy. All throughout the Heavenly Mandate Academy, countless people looked at the mighty figure standing above the swords. His sword will was so powerful that everyone could feel it clearly. One man had challenged all the lower-level Renhuangs of the Heavenly Mandate Academy. All throughout the Heavenly Mandate Academy, countless people looked at the mighty figure standing above the swords. His sword will was so powerful that everyone could feel it clearly. His words had been calm and humble, but he had all-encompassing self-confidence. He had challenged all of the lower-level Renhuangs of the Heavenly Mandate Academy. He had a second-tier divine wheel, but any of the lower-level Renhuangs of the Academy could fight him. Was it possible that this was the strongest of the people from the Holy Land of Taichu who had come here? Otherwise, he would not have stepped forward and said the things he had said. Or you can all come out together, said Mu Chinka, his arrogant voice filling the air. All throughout the Heavenly Mandate Academy, everyone's hearts beat faster. He stood there alone. It was as if there was no one else in the academy. He rode his sword through the air like he was the only person in the world. Moreover, Mu Chinka was a cultivator from the Holy Land of Taichu. The other cultivators of the Holy Land of Taichu watched him step forth. Their faces that had previously worn dark looks gradually changed. Now that Muchinka was getting involved, they would recover from their earlier loss of face. They knew why Muchinka had used such forceful words. There was but one reason. He wanted to wash away the shame of the previous battle. The cultivators of Song Imperial City watched this scene with relish. Now that Muchinka had drawn his sword, who could withstand it? The Heavenly Mandate Academy had relied on the strength of Yu Sheng and Gu Donglu to turn the tide. But in the end, they would be completely crushed by the Holy Land of Taichu. But they would not be as embarrassed if they lost now, as they had already accomplished some impressive feats. This was one of the strongest members of the Holy Land of Taichu, the master swordsman of the younger generation of the Taichu sparring grounds. The people of Song Imperial City had a good reason to have faith in him. With a reputation as mighty as his, he was not merely arrogant. They had also heard that Muchinka had cultivated up to the 7th level of the Tai sword. That meant that when he reached the upper level of the Runhuang Plain, he would certainly achieve great things with that technique. He might even reach the legendary 10th level. When someone like this came to the Void Realm to crush the Heavenly Mandate Academy, there was no suspense about the outcome. How wanton, said the people of the Heavenly Mandate Academy, as they looked up at the figure in the sky. Muchinka was far too arrogant. They had already lost several times, beaten by Yu Sheng and Gu Donglu, and yet they were still so forceful? The fighting spirit of the cultivators of the Heavenly Mandate dynasty had been ignited. Seeing how arrogant Muchinka was being, it was obvious how they would feel. The sound of people whispering to each other filled the air. Some of them even wanted to go out and fight him themselves. What are they saying? Someone snorted. They were crushed in the last battle with us. And now they come out with just one person? Where does this arrogance come from? It comes from the fact that they come from the Divine Prefecture, someone said sarcastically. Muchinka ignored the whispered conversations taking place in the crowd in the distance. He was looking at Futian. He had already noticed that the person leading this battle was not Lord Taixian, but was Futian. It seemed that he was able to directly take charge of many things here at the academy. Since they had studied the Heavenly Mandate Academy, they naturally knew that Futian was the spirit of the academy. Moreover, all those who had perfect divine wheels were gathered together beside Futian. They were the absolute core of the Heavenly Mandate Academy, and the ones that the academy relied on. They were the hope for the future. Now they were facing a powerful force that had come from outside. For the time being, they had to rely on the power of their alliances. Thus, as far as the people from the Holy Land of Taichu were concerned, as long as they could crush them, it would be enough. Do Zhao took a slight step forward. Fighting will wrapped around his body. He longed to fight, but in the end, he could bear it. He had lost to Sima Xiao, and this Muchinka was clearly stronger than Sima Xiao had been. If he went out, he would be no match. At that moment, a terrible sword pattern appeared behind Muchinka, and the sword way of all heavens wrapped around him, looking indescribably terrifying. Divine sword will swirled all around, making him look like a king of swords. Whoosh! A sword was unsheathed within the pattern and floated up. It started moving towards where Futian and the others were. Careful, said Muchinka. As he said this, the people around Futian paid close attention. Several of them took a few steps forward, their wheels of the great path flaring to life, and their auras becoming fierce. Muchinka waved his hand and uttered a single word, fall. Lightning flashed through the sky. A sword flew through the air, leaving a slash behind it. It moved so quickly it seemed to ignore all distance between it and its target, as well as the time it would take to get there. But at the moment that the sword came out, someone slashed out with their own sword. A beam of green, incomparably brilliant sword light bloomed, destroying everything in its path. Bang! There was a loud noise as a burst of sword chi came forth, blooming in front of Futian and the others. A terrible storm of swords appeared above them. They all put forth their powerful will to block the sword will, but there was still a sharp cracking sound, and many of the cultivators' robes were torn to shreds. A figure was knocked backward thousands of meters. Futian and the others looked back to see who it was. It was the princess of the Nantian Divine Kingdom, Nan Luotian. Nan Luotian had a second-tier divine wheel, but in the face of that sword, she was still forced to retreat. This showed how powerful the sword was. It ignored the space between them and seemed to move in no time at all. Its speed was truly astonishing. And it was not only fast, but it was overpowering as well. Nan Luotian was one of the top figures of the Heavenly Mandate Academy. She was one of the few cultivators who had proved herself worthy of creating a perfect divine will back in the god's relic. However, even someone as strong as her had been knocked back by that sword. Wuxia was frighteningly powerful. Moreover, this seemed to just be an ordinary sword of his. No wonder he dared to challenge all the cultivators of the Heavenly Mandate Academy together. With such exquisite swordsmanship, he could ignore their advantage in numbers. Who could compete with a sword like that? Who could block it? Wuxia took a step forward and looked at everyone from the Heavenly Mandate Academy, saying, "If no one comes forth, I will keep unleashing my sword." When he said this, his sword will surge terribly. It flowed through the sky, pressing down on Futian and the others. Who could fight him? All throughout the Heavenly Mandate Academy, everyone's eyes fell upon a single figure, the white-haired young man. He would probably have to go out and fight. He was the core of the Heavenly Mandate Academy, its soul. He had already proved his combat ability. Xiao Muyu had been willing to become his disciple, and Do Zhao and others had followed her. Even Emperor Nan had sent his daughter, Nan Luotian, to the Heavenly Mandate Academy to cultivate. Who besides him would dare to go out and fight? When Futian sensed that sword, he understood. He was the only one who could fight Wuxia. There was no one else. Thinking of this, he did not hesitate. He directly stepped forward towards Wuxia. Seeing him come, Wuxia fittingly did not send out his sword again, but stood there calmly, watching the figure before him. The slender white-haired figure with a white, unstained robe was handsome and heroic-looking. He was called the strongest cultivator of his generation in the Void Realm. Futian, said Wuxia to the figure now standing before him. When he had come to the Void Realm, he had heard that name many times. He was the representative of his generation. He had built the Heavenly Mandate Academy himself, making it one of the top forces in the Void Realm. Even the Holy Land of Taichu wanted to replace it. "Yes, I am Futian," answered Futian. The two of them seemed very friendly with each other. There was not a hint of enmity between them. Wuxia smiled and nodded, saying, "I am Wuxia of the Holy Land of Taichu." As he said this, the sword pattern behind him expanded in a flash, spreading throughout the sky. In the next instant, brilliant light bloomed up in the air. Golden rays shone forth, covering a vast area. Each ray seemed to be made of sword will. At that moment, Futian was bathed in golden light. He felt like he was standing amidst an endless sea of swords. Futian looked up into the sky. He could feel many different kinds of powers of the Great Path there. The Gungjin Great Path, the Great Path of Space, and more were integrated into that sword will. Wuxia flew up into the sky until he stood under the huge sword pattern. He looked down, staring at Futian, and said, "I am going to draw my sword." Futian nodded. The sound of elephants trumpeting filled the air. A golden divine elephant appeared over his body. At the same time, countless guqin strings appeared in the air, intertwining until they seemed to form a guqin. Music played out along with the sounds of swords. Wuxia reached out. The endless golden light gathered together, forming a golden divine sword in the sky. He grabbed the sword, then slashed it down through the air. At that moment, the golden light cut through the void, falling downwards. Suddenly, the sky was cut into countless different sections by the golden light as it slashed towards Futian. Futian reached out and plucked his fingers in the air. Suddenly the endless strings shook, whipping up a terrible storm of sword chi. Endless swords cut through the air in time with the music. It seemed to be the same sort of power as his opponents. The two forces slammed together in mid-air, forming a terrible, destructive airflow. The golden sword will seem to become even more powerful as it broke through layers and layers of defenses around Futian's body. The Tai sword that Wuxia had launched was coming straight towards him as well. It would reach him in an instant. Futian stepped through the air. The elephant trumpeted, making the earth and the heavens shake. He pointed, and the music seemed to swell. The great path flowed backward around his body, forming a storm of sword chi. that coalesced into a divine sword that shattered his opponent's power. It was the fleeting divine sword. Once it was formed, the great path would flow backward. The two beams of sword light crashed together. Rays of destructive light swept out in all directions like a curtain. All the powerful figures put out their hands, forming powerful defensive spells, to block the destructive sword while leaking out. The man from the holy land of Taichu looked down at Yi Futian. His fist sword had been blocked. This glorious hero from the Void Lands was truly a good fighter. Of course, that had only been his first sword. Not bad. Muchinka praised him as he stood there up in the air, bathed in golden light. He seemed to admire Yi Futian's swordsmanship. The fleeting divine sword had turned aside his stroke. This was very rare. But the sword will around him grew stronger, and the light from the Tai sword in his hand lit up the sky. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Not bad. Everyone was shocked when they heard Muchinka's words, especially the cultivators of the Heavenly Mandate Academy. Was this how he praised Yi Futian, by saying that he was not bad? Not bad. Everyone was shocked when they heard Muchinka's words, especially the cultivators of the Heavenly Mandate Academy. Was this how he praised Yi Futian, by saying that he was not bad? Was he not bad because he had been able to block Muchinka's sword? The way he said it had sounded like a teacher talking to a student. Apparently, even when facing an opponent like Yi Futian, Muchinka did not think that his enemy was a match for him. But this was not out of the ordinary. He was the strongest cultivator from the holy land of Taichu, a force from the divine prefecture in the outer realms. He was the absolute soul of their force. If he were defeated here, that would mean that they had truly lost. Thus, he had not truly unleashed his power. But even so, he was still ferociously strong. He gripped his sword and raised it with both hands. Suddenly, the endless sword will in the sword pattern in the sky flowed into his sword like infinite golden flames. Terrible golden light shone from the sword, piercing up into the sword pattern above it. Muchinka's body seemed to be armored in sword will. He released his grip, and suddenly his sword clanked loudly. Terrible images appeared all around him. He turned his sword, pointing it at Yi Futian. Muchinka formed seals with his hands, then pointed downwards. Whoosh! Flowing, golden firelight pierced the sky, leaving brilliant sword marks in the air that colored the entire area gold. The divine Tai sword was even more powerful than the previous one. Terrible sword will float around Yi Futian as well. When he saw what his opponent was doing, he made the same motions himself. He pointed into the sky, and a sword shot through the air, carrying with it terrible destructive power. It seemed like everything was destroyed wherever it passed. This was the dust swordsmanship that he had learned. The two swords slammed together in the air, whipping up a destructive storm. Golden beams of light and rhythmic sword will destroyed each other. A sharp and piercing roar rang out from where the two swords struck each other. The divine sword screamed, seemingly unable to destroy each other. How about this one? Said Yi Futian, looking up at the brilliant figure in the air. His white hair flew in the wind. His first sword had been not bad. How about this sword? Muchinka smiled. Incomparable terrifying sword will spilled out of the sword pattern in the sky. Then more swords materialized, 9 of them in sequence. They floated around him, swirling around his body. The sound of shrieking swords became even more terrible. Let's do another one, said Muchinka. As he said this, the 9 swords pierced through the air, shooting towards Yi Futian. The air itself seemed to be split apart, leaving behind 9 sword marks. The swords were too fast. They were truly pushed to the limit. Muchinka was different from Yi Futian. He was the heir of the Taichu sparring ground, and was called the master of his generation. He was a pure swordsman. Under the light of the Tai sword, no one of the same generation could compete with him. Yi Futian's golden divine elephant divine will surged to life, along with his second-tier divine wheel. As they did so, an overwhelming force bloomed, making all go quiet. Images of countless divine elephants appeared all around, but they could not block the oncoming sword attack. Once the swords reached their target, they would pierce through his body. Yi Futian lashed out with the divine elephant void-splitting fist, and suddenly an endless amount of divine elephant fist will appeared with a terrible roar. The air itself seemed like it would shatter as the fist will rushed towards the 9 oncoming swords. The unmatchable divine swords pierced through the divine elephant void-splitting fist without shattering. They continued onwards, but they had been greatly weakened. Crack! As they pierced through the giant divine elephants, sword marks appeared upon them, but they were not enough to cut the elephants open. Yi Futian strode boldly through the air as sword after sword shattered on his defenses. The 2 swords in the air above him broke as well. 3 swords. Wuxia had brought forth 3 swords, each one more powerful than the last. The first one had been comparable to the fleeting divine sword, and the second had been comparable to his dust swordsmanship. The third had cut right through his divine elephant fist, but had been stopped by his divine elephant body. Of all the people at the same level as him that Wuxia had faced, Yi Futian was, without a doubt, the strongest. He was able to compete with him. He was the sword master of the holy land of Taichu, and a great future figure of the divine prefecture. His power and talent were beyond all doubt. Standing up in the sky, he watched Yi Futian block his 3 swords. He thought to himself that he was truly worthy of being called the most powerful cultivator of his generation in the Void Realm. He was indeed very talented, but he had already cultivated 7 levels of the Tai sword. 3 swords were just the beginning. His next swords would be even stronger. Boom! Terrible sword will descended. As he stood there bathing in the might of the swords, Wuxia had already transformed. His aura was getting stronger and stronger. The baptism of swordsmanship seemed to have clad him in an armor of swords. He was now so powerful that he seemed to be at an even higher level than before. Boom! A terrifying storm fell upon them, and the falling sword will grew even fiercer. Everyone looked up into the sky. This had become a world of swordsmanship, and Wuxia seemed like its master, a king of swords. What level of swordsmanship is this? Asked the princess from within the crowd of people from Song Imperial City. She could feel how incredibly powerful the sword will was, but she was not clear on what actual level it was at. The first 3 swords were probably level 5 or less. This one now might be up to the 6th level, said the elder. He knew of the Tai sword, but every realm had their own version of it. He had heard that Wuxia had cultivated up to the 7th level of the Tai sword. In his opinion, the power that Wuxia was displaying now must be at least the 6th level. With this kind of power, the elder had no doubt the Wuxia was indeed unparalleled in the Void Realm. No one on the same level as him could withstand him. Now, the main thing to do was watch and see if Yi Futian could. Wuxia had indeed raised the Tai sword will up to the 6th level. Under this much power, countless swords were piercing through the sword pattern in the sky and floating there. Each one of the swords was just as mighty and terrifying as the previous swords. The sky seemed like it would break due to all the swords. Everyone below was looking up. They could feel how powerful the sword will was, and it made them tremble. If the sword fell upon him, would Yi Futian be able to bear it? Yi Futian naturally felt how terrifying Wuxia's aura of swordsmanship was right now. If an attack of this level struck him directly, he would probably be put in a difficult situation. I will try the next sword, said Wuxia. His sword will was still coalescing. Yi Futian looked at him. The Guqin strings of the Great Path were still vibrating. A song of swordsmanship resonated throughout the world. Swords materialized all around him, producing a powerful resonance as they followed the rhythm of the song. At the same time, an image of a celestial god appeared in the air above his head. This was the ultimate technique of the Golden Divine Nation, the sigh of the divine god. Suddenly, his power became far more fearsome. He reached up into the sky, and suddenly, the strings of the Great Path formed into many swords. They merged into one in time with the rhythm of the song, becoming a single sword that fell into Yi Futian's hand. I have withstood 3 of your swords. It's time for you to take one of mine, said Yi Futian. He gripped his sword and rushed forward. Swords clattered all around them without end, as everything was destroyed and turned to dust. Everywhere he passed, the Great Path seemed to flow backward. The falling sword will was destroyed. Wuxia watched this happen, then slashed out downwards. The endless swords that were forming destroyed the very air itself, as they rushed towards Yi Futian, trying to bury him. The whole area seemed like it would be shattered by the sword will. But Yi Futian charged right into the storm of swordsmanship with his sword in hand. He thrust it forward. Brilliant, flowing light bloomed as the sword swept through the air, destroying Wuxia's swordsmanship and shattering his swords into dust. At that moment, Yi Futian was able to cut through them like a knife through bamboo. He continued forward. When he saw this, Wuxia gripped his sword tighter. He transformed into a beam of light and disappeared from where he had been. Then he shot downward, slashing out with his sword. Bang! 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 Swords slammed into Yi Futian's body, but they were destroyed and could not halt his forward momentum. He pierced through everything until he appeared in front of Wuxia. When he arrived, the endless sword will in the sword pattern up in the sky covered Wuxia's body. At that moment, Wuxia seemed to meld with it, like he was possessed by a divine sword. He was a master of swords. He himself was a sword. He pointed downward towards Yi Futian's oncoming sword. His fingertip collided with the sword, causing a shocking scene. Yi Futian's sword began to crack, inch by inch, as the terrifying sword will pierced through it. Bang! Yi Futian was sent flying backward as destructive sword will raged through his body, trying to shatter him. So powerful, everyone's hearts were trembling. Yi Futian's sword itself was frightening enough. But even that sword had been stopped by a single figure. The 7th level, said the elder of Song Imperial City. This must have been the 7th level of the Tai Yi sword. At that moment, Wuxia seemed like a sword god. Every part of his body was made of swords, and each sword seemed to be the sharpest in the world. Whoosh! Wuxia disappeared, and Yi Futian suddenly felt a grave threat. He turned into a bolt of lightning and disappeared as well. There was a sharp cracking sound as a beam of sword will swept through the space where he had just been. It had fallen from the sky, leaving a straight sword mark. It left a terrifyingly deep hole in the ground underneath that was filled with sword chi. Although he had missed, Wuxia disappeared again. He was moving as quickly as possible. Yi Futian retreated continuously. The two of them seemed like a pair of bolts of lightning. Many of the people watching could not follow them with their eyes. They were both skilled in the power of the great path of space. Bang! Finally, the sound of a collision rang out. There was the sound of 10,000 elephants trumpeting, and then the sound of violent destruction, as the divine elephant void-splitting fist was pierced. Yi Futian was sent flying backward yet again. Wuxia appeared filled with sword will. It looked like all the world behind him had turned into a world of swordsmanship. This terrifying vision made everyone tremble uncontrollably. Is there any point in continuing to retreat? Wuxia asked Yi Futian. You have already made me bring out the 7th level of the Tai Yi sword. You have proved how strong you are. Yi Futian looked at his opponent and said, I wanted to see if you were at your limit. It seems like that was your strongest sword, no? Wuxia frowned, then looked at Yi Futian and asked, What of it? You are quite good, answered Yi Futian. But we are still far from my limit. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Wuxia was stunned when he heard what Yi Futian had said. He frowned slightly. Yi Futian had said that he was nowhere near his limits. Wuxia was stunned when he heard what Yi Futian had said. He frowned slightly. Yi Futian had said that he was nowhere near his limits. Did that mean that he had not unleashed his full combat ability yet? When he used the 7th level of the Tai Yi sword, his sword will was so strong that even in the holy land of Taichu, there were scant few people at his level who could withstand it. Yi Futian had been sorely pressed by his swords. He had just been doing his best to avoid their edges, but now he said that he had not put forth his strongest fighting abilities yet. So what level was the limit of Yi Futian's fighting ability at? All throughout the Heavenly Mandate Academy below them, everything was extremely quiet, as everyone watched the battle. This was the final battle between the two great teaching forces, the Holy Land of Taichu and the Heavenly Mandate Academy. The most talented cultivator from the force from the Divine Prefecture, Wuxia, had up till now still not forced Yi Futian to his limits. Did that mean that Yi Futian had a chance to defeat Muchinka? The cultivators within the Heavenly Mandate Academy felt their blood surge. They gazed fixedly at the battle in the sky. They had all been waiting for this battle. For Yi Futian, the soul of the academy, to drive off the people from the divine prefecture. Did they want to replace them? If the Renhuangs who had come were not even good enough to suppress them, how could they talk about replacing them? Everyone was holding their breath in anticipation. After saying what he had said, Yi Futian was probably going to unleash his strongest ability. Endless beams of golden sword will descended from the pattern behind Muchinka onto his body. He transformed into a divine sword. Every one of the threads of sword will surrounding him could threaten someone at his level. Then let me see your limit, said Muchinka. As he said this, space will bloomed. He transformed into a sword and moved forward, disappearing from view. But at that moment, he saw a pair of infinitely deep eyes. He was still moving forward, and seemed like he would be able to pierce across a great distance instantly. But he found that the distance that he originally would have been able to move across in the space of a single thought was getting further away. Even things that had only been an inch away were now impossible to touch. He seemed to fall into those terrifying eyes. They became a space of their own, and pulled him into them. These were eyes that Yi Futian had created. The almighty eyes. His third divine wheel, thought Muchinka. This was a divine wheel of eye sorcery. It covered the whole area with a single glance, and forged a world of eyes. This was the ultimate use of the great path of space. Muchinka had seen many powerful figures in his time cultivating at the Holy Land of Taichu, and had come into contact or fought many Renhuangs. Thus, he had seen all kinds of divine wheels. Moreover, the archives told of many great figures in history, and their divine wheels. These countless people had countless different kinds of divine wheels. In the instant that he was drawn into the almighty eyes, he realized what was going on. He had been pulled into a world of eyes, where the great path of space and eye sorcery were melded together. When this was added to Yi Futian's masterful understanding, he had forged it into a divine wheel. An eye sorcery space, snorted Muchinka. He suddenly stopped. He was just like Yi Futian, skilled with the great path of space. There was only one way to deal with a powerful divine will like this. He had to break through it. He would shatter the eye sorcery space with an equally strong use of the great path of space. Boom! Sword will surged in the air above him. Endless divine swords appeared in the sword pattern in the air above him. Sword will seeped out from it, transforming into 1,000-meter-long divine swords that stretched through the sky. His sword will surged and resonated with his body. The sword will within him surged as well, and shot up into the clouds, as if it was trying to pierce the air itself. Slash! Said Muchinka, his voice extremely sharp. As he said this, the divine swords that were stretching out through the sky slashed out through the air, trying to destroy the eye sorcery space. Golden sword marks appeared in the sky as the air was cut through. Muchinka moved through the sky, transforming into a straight line. The eye sorcery space seemed like it was about to split open, as it was torn by the terrifying sword will. Muchinka caught a glimpse of Yi Futian's figure once again. This time, Yi Futian was standing above him, radiating brilliant light, his white hair flying in the wind. He was bathed in golden radiance, like the sun and the moon standing in the sky surrounded by stars. It seemed that there was yet another layer to this space. The great path of space was overlapping. As he stood there in the sky, Yi Futian was filled with the incomparably terrifying power of the divine elephants. They possessed him with their mighty strength. His hands were as strong as those of a god of war, and he gripped a golden staff that was suffused with radiance. While his sword force was still bursting out from him, Yi Futian moved, striding through the sky. His form was as mighty as that of a god of war, and he thrust out with his staff, making the very air tremble. As he did so, it seemed like all the stars were falling. It was like the end of the world. He had cultivated the 9 heavenly attacks for many years, and now his staff arts had transformed. They were no longer just the ones from the Ape Emperor. Now he had integrated them with the Great Path, forming an all-new staff art. It was no longer like an ape's attack. It was something of his own. His staff seemed like it would break the sky itself. Up until then, Muchinka had been unavoidable, and his sword still had its momentum. He could only move forward without stopping through the air, slashing towards the oncoming staff. There was a sharp cracking sound as the sword shattered many stars. The fact that Wuxia was able to shatter stars with his sword showed just how terrifying the sword was. Boom! The staff fell onto the divine sword that Wuxia had transformed into. Its sword will was shattered wildly. At that moment, destructive power erupted. Bang! The sword's momentum was finally firmly stopped, and the brilliant, incomparable figure was forced backward even more quickly than he had come forward. But Futian did not stop his attack. He continued moving through the air, ignoring the distance between them. When Wuxia was no longer able to form more sword will, he struck out with his staff again. Bang! This time the staff was even more forceful. Wuxia's sword had been stopped, and so he had no way to block this attack. He was sent flying backward yet again, and cracks appeared in the sword armor that covered his body. Then it shattered. Blood ran from the corner of his mouth, and his face was pale. In reality, no one on the outside had any way of knowing what had just happened. The area was closed off by the great path of space. As Wuxia was struck by continuous attacks, his wheel of the great path disappeared, and everything returned to normal. The people on the outside saw Futian standing there calmly, while Wuxia was bent over, blood staining his clothes. Everyone's heart was pounding. They looked at Futian again, seeming like they wanted to see if he was wounded, but they only saw the handsome young man standing there with his hair blowing in the wind. His black eyes were still as deep and mysterious as always. Obviously he had not been hurt. Had Futian won this battle? There are no realms when it comes to the Great Path. The Great Emperor's divine prefecture controls both the outer realms and the Void Realm. The Great Emperor wants the world of cultivation to become stronger. Thus, although the Heavenly Mandate dynasty is a force from the Void Realm, we will not refuse anyone from the outer realms who wishes to cultivate here, said Futian. Thus, if anyone from the Holy Land of Taichu is willing to join us in our quest to seek the way, we will be happy to welcome them. His words rang through the air, and were imprinted on everyone's minds. At that moment, many of the younger people there looked at him with eyes full of worship. This was a true hero. The Holy Land of Taichu had come at them with force, trying to replace them. Their might had seemed unassailable. But now, Futian had used his power to tell them that they could come to the Heavenly Mandate Academy to study. The academy would welcome them. No matter how powerful the forces of the Divine Prefecture were, no matter what their teaching holy lands were like, the Heavenly Mandate Academy could defeat them, could crush them underfoot. Did they want to replace them? The teaching holy lands of the Divine Prefecture were only worthy of studying under them. This feeling gave rise to a fierce sense of pride within the people of the Heavenly Mandate realm. When they heard Futian's voice, they could feel their blood rising. He had told a teaching holy land of the Divine Prefecture to come to the academy to study. In a true battle between top forces, the Heavenly Mandate Academy had achieved a complete victory. Futian had defeated Wuxia, and Yusheng had defeated Sima Xiao. Amazing! Called Do Zhao from within the academy, a look of worship in his eyes. If it had been him, he would have definitely said something embarrassing. But Futian's words were more dignified. The Holy Land of Taichu could come to the Heavenly Mandate Academy to study. Incredible! Xiaomuyu was becoming even more appreciative of her mazer. A strange light lit up her beautiful eyes. Now the Void Realm was in turmoil, and the 9 realms were in chaos, meaning that this conflict between the Heavenly Mandate Academy and the Holy Land of Taichu was very important. Futian had fought perfectly, defeating an enemy from the Divine Prefecture. This was a huge inspiration for the people of the 9 realms. Nan Luotian looked at Futian, understanding why her father had praised him so highly. Now that she had experienced this battle, she really felt it. When he came to full maturity, he could truly become the leader of an era. Many people could be called proud sons of heaven, but they could not be representatives of an entire era. But Futian could do it. The people of the Holy Land of Taichu were speechless when they heard Futian's words. What could they say? Wuxia had been beaten. How could he have lost? Had someone so astonishing actually appeared in the Void Realm? And it was not just him. Previously, Yu Sheng and Gu Donglu had revealed incredible power. These people, gathered together at the Heavenly Mandate Academy, had dealt the Holy Land of Taichu a stinging defeat. In that case, what right did they have to enter the Heavenly Mandate Academy and control it? "Let's go," said the white-robed cultivator from the Holy Land of Taichu. Suddenly, he and the others flashed away, bringing Mu Chinka with them. Their plan had completely failed. It seemed like it would be a little more troublesome to gain a foothold in the Void Realm now. This confrontation would have an extremely negative influence on the Holy Land of Taichu. After all, they had originally come to invade. If they had won, then it all would have been worth it. But since they had lost, then this move had been extremely costly. Everyone watched them go, and many people began to whisper. In this battle, the power that those three members of the Heavenly Mandate Academy had shown had once again shocked the world. Back in the restaurant, Mei Ting put down his glass and frowned. So he was that strong. Then whose descendant was he? If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Chapter 1776 Mei Ting pays a visit. Chapter 1776 Mei Ting pays a visit after cultivators from the Holy Land of Taichu left. The huge crowd outside of the Heavenly Mandate Academy also dispersed reluctantly. Yi Futian's group returned to the academy. Lord Taixian glanced around at the crowd and said, "Now that a storm has been stirred up in the 9 realms, I hope that the cultivators of the 3,000 realms of the Great Path can stand united and overcome this chaotic situation together. I also hope that friends from the outer realms will not stir up trouble. It is as Yi Futian has said, regardless of whether we are from the outer realms, the Void Realm, or the original realm, these are all lands of the Divine Prefecture." Dong Huang the Great unified the Divine Prefecture in the hopes of making martial arts prosper. This is also the goal of the Heavenly Mandate Academy. We hope to spread our teachings across the world and cause martial arts to prosper, cultivating even more outstanding teachers of martial arts in the future. Lord Taixian continued, "Of course, if our friends from the outer realms have their own opinions, they can come and sit down with the Heavenly Mandate Academy to discuss things. We can learn from each other and improve our relations. That is all I have to say for today. Farewell." After hearing Lord Taishuan's words, the various cultivators left one after another. The cultivators of the Heavenly Mandate realm were somewhat reluctant. Many youths were asking, "When will the Heavenly Mandate Academy take in new disciples again?" "I don't know. However, wanting to join the Heavenly Mandate Academy now will most likely be even more difficult," someone lamented. The people around him all nodded their heads in agreement. Recent events caused the Heavenly Mandate Academy to become even more famous. In today's battle, Yi Futian and his group fully displayed the grandeur of the cultivators of the Void Realm and crushed the cultivators of the Divine Prefecture's training Holy Land who came to challenge them. Such a glorious battle would certainly be one for the history books. In the future, if Yi Futian and Yu Sheng stood at the top of the world, this would be a crowning moment on their road to glory, a moment in the past of legendary figures. The next time the Heavenly Mandate Academy accepted disciples, many people would want to join them. Most likely, even figures who had already made a name for themselves would want to join the Heavenly Mandate Academy to cultivate. I wonder how Yi Futian, Yu Sheng, and the others train. The difference between them and us is truly enormous, someone lamented. The difference in their talent was too huge. The members of the Holy Land of Taichu from the Divine Prefecture could not be considered weak. Sima Zhao's war god's true will of waves had peerless attack and defense. However, it was forcefully suppressed by Yu Sheng and shattered with a punch. When the 7th wave of Tai Yi sword burst forth from Mu Chinka, he shattered the space with just a finger. Nevertheless, he still lost to Yi Futian. Prior to that, even Nan Luoshan was sent flying backward by the sword will of Mu Chinka during their short exchange. If the two of them had engaged on the battlefield, Nan Luoshan would have certainly lost. It was actually apparent from a simple exchange. Currently, can Yi Futian be considered the top figure of the generation? Someone wondered. Of course, in the generation, among those of the same plane, it is impossible for anyone in the 3,000 realms of the Great Path to be able to defeat him. If there are such people, it is only possible if they are also in the Heavenly Mandate Academy, someone to the side said with a laugh. Yu Sheng. Maybe. The person who had spoken before replied with a laugh. Yet, alone in this generation, Yi Futian and Yu Sheng will most likely be two of the most outstanding figures in the 3,000 realms of the Great Path, ever since Donghuang the Great unified the Divine Prefecture. They might even be the two most outstanding figures. The person to the side was stunned when he heard these words. He stopped in his tracks and revealed a pondering look. However, after pondering for a bit, he also realized this and agreed with it somewhat. After Donghuang the Great unified the Divine Prefecture, there indeed had never been a figure that could cause uproars time and time again at the lower-level Renhuang plane like this. Yi Futian had also already formed a team of flawless divine will possessors. This was too frightening. It was not inappropriate to call him the most outstanding figure. Now they could only wait and see whether Yi Futian could one day rule over the 9 realms. In the Heavenly Mandate Academy, Yi Futian and the others arrived back one after another. Although they had pushed back the cultivators of the Holy Land of Taichu, Yi Futian did not feel happy. The Holy Land of Taichu had directly come knocking on their door to challenge them, and wanted to replace them. This could only mean that the current situation in the 9 realms was getting more and more chaotic. The forces of the Divine Prefecture already could not wait to take over the 9 realms and replace the original forces. From this battle, Yi Futian had also gotten a faint grasp on the strength of these top forces of the Divine Prefecture. Although his side had won, Yi Futian had witnessed the abilities of Mu Qingke, Sima Xiao, and even that swordsman. If Yi Futian Yu Sheng, as well as his third older brother, hadn't been the ones fighting, they would have lost this battle. Moreover, this group was just a fraction of the power of the Holy Land of Taichu. It was difficult to imagine how frightening the background of the Holy Land of Taichu in the Divine Prefecture was. The difference between them and the Heavenly Mandate Academy was too huge. However, this was also understandable. The forces of the Divine Prefecture in the Outer Realms had countless competitors for eons. Yi Futian's group could not possibly imagine what huge figures had been born from such conditions. The Heavenly Mandate Academy could be compared with such giants. Even if they were an alliance of many forces, they were still no match for the forces of the Divine Prefecture. From the attitude that Song Imperial City and the Holy Land of Taichu bore against the Heavenly Mandate Academy, one could sense such a sentiment. These top forces did not only contain arrogant people. Song Imperial City had wanted to directly guide them. The Holy Land of Taichu had wanted to directly replace them. This proved one thing. The overall ability of the other party was far superior to their own each time. Older brother, what is that 4th divine wheel of yours? What happened in the divine wheel dimension? Dozhao asked as he looked curiously at Yi Futian. Many people immediately also looked at him. They all wanted to know what had happened. Prior to this, during the battle with the Shen clan, Yi Futian had also defeated Shen Hao in such a manner. It is a boundary wheel, Yi Futian replied. A boundary wheel? Dozhao was somewhat confused. He did not really understand. It can forge a self-contained space of the Great Path. It can even imprison the way of others. Yi Futian explained without hiding anything. Imprison? In a low voice, Xiaomuyu asked. Master, how does it imprison the way of others? Within my divine wheel dimension, others will not be able to communicate with the powers of heaven and earth. They will be severed from the Great Path, Yi Futian explained. Say, for example, the other party is proficient in the Great Path of space. If they are unable to escape my boundary wheel's dimension and attempt to use the Great Path of space to whisk themselves away, the passageway of the Great Path that they create will be imprisoned and severed. It sounds like an even more advanced divine wheel, Xiaomuyu mumbled. In the 3,000 realms of the Great Path, divine wheels are categorized into levels such as flawless level, celestial level, and so on. However, in supreme forces like ours, there is only the distinction of flawless or flawed divine wheels. If so, Then in the divine prefecture of the outer realms, are flawless divine wheels also classified according to ranks? Or should it be said that there are levels higher than flawless? I do not know, Futian replied. However, there might exist such levels. In reality, Futian's fourth divine wheel was forged with the world tree's life spirit as its foundation, and it was unique. He knew that his way was a flawless one. It might actually be different from others. Master, you seem unhappy, Xiaomiyu commented. So many forces have their eyes on the Heavenly Mandate Academy. What is there to be happy about? Futian responded with a smile. The 9 realms are in chaos. Our Heavenly Mandate Academy is among the first few to be swept into this chaos. I do not know whether or not we should be proud of our Heavenly Mandate Academy's influence. The crowd was also speechless. It seemed that it was indeed the case. The Heavenly Mandate Academy was the first to be swept into this chaos. First, it was the Dark Army who had descended. Now the Holy Land of Taichu had also come. I hope that we have more time, Futian thought to himself. Currently, he felt that his training was progressing too slowly. However, at his current level of cultivation, further improvement was indeed too difficult. This speed of cultivation was already extremely fast. If it were ordinary renhuangs like Emperor Xia, wanting to break through to the next plane was almost impossible. This chaotic situation in the 9 realms would certainly last for a very long time. The forces from the outer realms are strong. However, right now, since the Heavenly Mandate Academy has formed alliances with various forces, it is not a place that the outer realms forces can easily lay their hands on. Nan Luotian voiced out softly. If the Heavenly Mandate Academy is faced with trouble, the other forces will not sit still. Futian nodded in acknowledgement. With Emperor Nan as my support, I can indeed be at ease. The teleportation grand matrix of the Heavenly Mandate Academy was now connected to various major forces. If war really erupted, strong aid would step in. With Divine Palace Lord, Emperor Nan, and other top figures around, the Heavenly Mandate Academy was capable of taking on all sorts of big battles. Everyone, go back to your own training, Futian said. All the cultivators left one by one and went back to their own training. This battle continued to be the topic of conversation in Heavenly Mandate City. Gradually, the news of this battle spread throughout the 9 realms. Other than Futian, Yusheng's name was now renowned throughout the 9 realms. The next day, everything returned to its normal peaceful condition. Futian was cultivating quietly. However, at that moment, a silhouette suddenly appeared outside the palace. It was Lord Taixian. He was staring straight ahead into the distance. Dark streaks of wind flowed over, without a sound or presence. Then, they formed a black-robed silhouette that silently appeared in the inner quarters of the Heavenly Mandate Academy. All this actually happened without a sound. Mei Ting. Lord Taishuan's facial expression turned ugly. It was too dangerous for a figure like Mei Ting to suddenly arrive and directly enter into the inner quarters of the Heavenly Mandate Academy without a trace. What business do you have with us? Lord Taishuan's body was tense. He seemed anxious. Mei Ting cast a glance at Lord Taixian, saying, I am here for some matters. Do not alarm the rest. Lord Taixian revealed a strange look. He did not understand. Did Mei Ting not want to alert the others? He still stood there motionless, contemplating countermeasures. He was not sure exactly how powerful Mei Ting's cultivation was. It was certainly more powerful than his own. He only needed to delay the other party for a while. When the others came over through the teleportation grand matrix, they could surround Mei Ting. However, if they attacked, it would bring calamity to the Heavenly Mandate Academy. Before you can possibly pose a threat to me, what do you think will happen to the Heavenly Mandate Academy? You better consider it carefully. Mei Ting's eyes were jet black. His voice was extremely calm. What he said was exactly what Lord Taixian was worried about. Mei Ting walked straight in. Futian said, Lord Taixian, please let Senior Mei in. When the Dark Army descended, and Mei Ting had appeared, Dragon Master had mentioned to Futian that Mei Ting had paid a visit to dragon gods. He had also killed the demonic dragon. However, Futian could vaguely sense that this matter was not as simple as it appeared. It might be related to Yusheng. Otherwise, Yi Futian could not think of other reasons why such a terrifying existence would kill the demonic dragon. Now that Mei Ting was here, Yi Futian was even more certain that his arrival was linked to Yusheng. The only connection between the demonic dragon and the Heavenly Mandate Academy was Yusheng. Yi Futian had always wondered about the true identity of his godfather. This Mei Ting might be related to his godfather. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 1777 Provocation? Chapter 1777 Provocation? Mei Ting walked over to Yi Futian's side. Lord Taixian still stood in his spot alert. Mei Ting was too strong. With him here and in such close proximity with Yi Futian, it would only take Mei Ting a split second if he decided to kill Yi Futian. A figure at Mei Ting's level was not someone Yi Futian could defend against. Everyone else, please go about your own business. It is better if you keep quiet about my visit, Mei Ting said to Lord Taixian, his back to him. Right now Mei Ting was also hesitating. Should he act on it now? Or should he go back to the devil world first? At first, he was only here to look for news about that person. However, he had found the person's descendant now. This matter involved the noblest bloodline of the devil world. Even as a devil general, who could make decisions regarding most matters, Mei Ting did not dare to act recklessly. Hence, he still opted to have a meeting with Yi Futian first. However, before Mei Ting came to his final decision, he did not want to expose Yusheng's identity to the rest. Therefore, he warned Lord Taixian not to spread news about his visit. Lord Taixian, I am fine here. Senior Mei and I are just having a casual chat. Please seal this space, Yi Futian said. Lord Taixian glanced at Yi Futian and saw the latter, giving him a nod of reassurance. Since Yi Futian knew what he was doing, Lord Taixian would not say any more. He turned around and left, sealing off the space with his will. Others could not invade the space even with their divine consciousness. Judging from the fact that Mei Ting had personally come to meet Yi Futian, Lord Taixian had a feeling that the matter that they were about to discuss was pressure acting around him. It might be related to some secrets. Mei Ting stared at him and threatened. Since Lord Taixian already know about the demon on Dragon Mountain, he was also unwilling to speak about Yi Futian. You know how it ended for him. With an outstanding here after dealing with him. Yi Futian's performance since then had been impressive as well. Learned of Yusheng's existence from the demonic dragon, even if one revealed that Yi Futian here might have other identities. Senior has come looking for me and not Yi Futian's talent was extraordinary. That means that you also know that Yusheng himself does not know about his identity. After Lord Taixian left, it is the same for me. Yi Futian I am afraid that I do not have the answers that Senior is seeking. Junior Yi Futian welcomed Senior replied honestly. Mei Ting stepped forward and stood not far from Yi Futian the same question. He was dressed in black clothes and had eyes Mei Ting revealed a strange look by just standing there. Yi Futian, he already made the question feel pressured. Indeed, his aura was too powerful. He had heard from the demonic dragon before him was a top figure, also did not know his own identity. Hence, Mei Ting had chosen to find Yi Futian. He had heard that ever since they came to the heavenly mandate
this was what he was curious
about.
followed behind
I am
Futian,
as though he was Futian's shadow.
Frowned and said,
Therefore,
you know
that
is
not what I am
chosen,
to find
but that is all that I know.
to see
whether he could learn anything from
Once he finished saying this,
however,
demonic might
descended
actually
on him.
asked him who Yusheng was. Judging from Futian's extremely calm manner, he most likely had some rough guesses, but might not have known the truth. He did not appear to be lying. Could it be possible that even these two juniors did not know their own origins? However, this also seemed to be that person's way of doing things. For Futian to ask who Yusheng was naturally the same as asking who Meiting was. He was referring to their backgrounds. Meiting clearly would not answer Futian. Today he had come to ask questions, not answer them. What is your relationship with Emperor Yi Qing? Meiting asked as he stared at Futian. His eyes gradually became even more frightening. Demonic might press down on Futian. Even if Meiting believed that Futian was not lying, it was impossible for him to let the matter go just like that. Emperor Yi Qing had the surname Yi. What was Futian's relationship with him? Could it be that Futian was the descendant of Emperor Yi Qing? From Meiting's perspective, the possibility was extremely high. Upon hearing Meiting's words, Futian knew that Meiting might know more than he had imagined. Although he did not answer Futian, Meiting certainly knew about Yusheng's background. Where is Yusheng's father? Meiting continued interrogating Futian. He walked forward, and his pressure pressed down on Futian. Immediately, a terrifying demonic might surged into Futian's mind. This caused a frightening demonic shadow to appear deep within Futian's pupils. Futian's gaze slowly changed. It turned somewhat cold. I invited Senior in and asked Lord Taishian to leave as a sign of my sincerity. However, if Senior wishes to act in such a manner, even if I have to fight to the death, I will not yield, Futian said in a cold tone. Also, even if Senior truly can make it out of here in one piece by injuring me, I can assure you that Yusheng will spend the rest of his life trying to kill you with all his might. Meiting was a demonic cultivator. Futian conjectured the relationship between Meiting and Yusheng. Hence, he had said so as a probe. As expected, after listening to Futian's threat, Meiting paused for a moment. The pressure that he exerted on Futian lessened significantly. He seemed to be hesitating. Meiting's response verified Futian's prediction. Yusheng's background was most likely very noble. Even Meiting had his concerns when he was up against Yusheng. He might not dare to offend Yusheng. If Meiting was here to capture Yusheng, or if he didn't care about Yusheng's identity, then he could have just ignored Futian's threat. However, after wavering for a moment, Meiting continued to pressure Futian with his might. An alarming demonic will invaded Futian's mind. Meiting's pupils were as dark as night. Futian carried some secrets with him. These secrets might be related to Emperor Yi Qing and that person. If he could investigate the whole matter thoroughly, he believed that the Devil Emperor would not blame him for acting rashly. He would accept it even if Yusheng was going to hate him in the future. Therefore, after considering for a moment, Meiting still decided to invade Futian's mind. He would not hurt Futian, but he needed to know his background, and from there, he might be able to locate that person. Stop it! A chilly voice sounded. Meiting paused momentarily and turned around. A burly youth was standing behind him while staring at him, with an extremely cold gaze. He was none other than Yusheng. Meiting stared at Yusheng. At this very moment, the former had no idea how he should face the latter. Yusheng was the descendant of a legendary figure of the Devil World. However, the legendary figure was a traitor of the Devil World. Yusheng was the son of the traitor of the Devil World. Although Yusheng was the son of the traitor, the noblest bloodline of the Devil World still coursed through his veins. This was an undeniable fact. He might also be the only one among the younger generations who possessed this bloodline. Based on this, Meiting would definitely not dare to hurt Yusheng. Only the Devil Emperor had the power to decide Yusheng's fate. The demonic might lingered, but the pressure it exerted on Futian weakened gradually. In the end, Meiting ceased attacking and retracted his demonic might. His gaze was still fixed on the figure, who initially stood behind him. This burly youth seemed to be full of power. His indifferent gaze was domineering and cold, showing no emotions. Judging from the youth's temperament, he was an innate demonic cultivator. He was the heir of the noblest bloodline of the devil world. Naturally, he stood head and shoulders above the rest of the demons. He was the future demon god. Mei Ting and Yusheng stared at each other. The former was a devil general who was all-powerful, one of the 8 great devil generals under the command of the devil emperor. The latter was a junior, who had just broken through to the Runhuang plain. However, he stared into Mei Ting's eyes boldly, showing no sign of fear. "Do you know who you are?" Mei Ting asked Yusheng. Yusheng stared at him, and did not reply. He didn't know the answer. "Remember, you do not need to bow to anyone. You do not need to follow anyone either. Not everything the person told you was true. Perhaps everything he said was a lie," Mei Ting said. Yusheng's gaze wavered slightly, then it turned colder. Mei Ting's words seemed to be provoking his relationship with Yi Futian. Was the person that Mei Ting had mentioned his father? However, father's words were different from Mei Ting's. In fact, father had advised him that his existence was for the use of Yi Futian. Seeing that Yusheng was still staring at him motionlessly, Mei Ting raised his head and glanced outside. Then, he swept a glance at Yi Futian and Yusheng again. Mei Ting moved back a few steps and saluted Yusheng with his head lowered. He seemed to be paying his respects to Yusheng. After that, strands of demonic will surrounded Mei Ting's body, and he transformed into a beam of dark demonic light. In the blink of an eye, he disappeared. Yi Futian raised his head and looked at the disappearing silhouette. Then he looked at Yusheng. He felt uneasy. Yusheng's identity appeared to be even more extraordinary than what he had imagined. An existence like Mei Ting had actually bowed and saluted Yusheng before he left. However, he seemed to disrespect Yi Futian's godfather by addressing him as that person. What exactly happened in the past? As for Mei Ting's provocation, Yi Futian did not mind it. He walked towards Yusheng and whispered, "No matter what decisions you make in the future, I will support you." Yusheng looked at him and nodded. He knew that Yi Futian would support him regardless of what he decided to do. Their relationship had long transcended the point where they needed to explain themselves to each other. It was not something Mei Ting could waver with just a line or two. Everyone else thought that he was following Yi Futian. However, he did so because he put his faith in Yi Futian. As for Yi Futian himself, he had never thought of Yusheng as a follower. Yusheng would not bat an eyelid if he needed to sacrifice himself for Yi Futian. Besides that, he was well aware that Yi Futian would do the same for him too. They had absolute trust in each other. 2 silhouettes approached them. Other than Lord Taishian, another person was here. It was Emperor Nan. Clearly Lord Taishian was worried about them. Mei Ting was too powerful, so Lord Taishian made a trip to the Nantian Divine Kingdom and invited Emperor Nan over. However, it seemed like he had worried too much. Nothing happened, and Mei Ting had left. Yi Futian greets Emperor Nan. When Yi Futian saw Emperor Nan, he bowed to welcome him. He was very polite towards Emperor Nan, as he was one of the figures who stood at the peak of the 3,000 realms of the Great Path. Moreover, Emperor Nan had obviously come here to help him. Emperor Nan nodded slightly and asked, "Why was Mei Ting here?" Yi Futian smiled while shaking his head. Seeing his expression, Emperor Nan understood Yi Futian's concern and did not probe any further. Everyone had their own secrets. Regardless of what intention Mei Ting had for coming over, it was of no consequence since nothing had happened. It looks like the Heavenly Mandate Academy still needs to strengthen its defenses. Cultivators at the level of Mei Ting are too dangerous, Emperor Nan commented. Lord Taishian nodded in strong agreement. If you find any errors, broken links, non-standard content, etc., please let us know so we can fix it as soon as possible. Tip: you can use left, right, A and D keyboard keys to browse between chapters. Chapter 1778 The Curtain Unveiled. Chapter 1778 The Curtain Unveiled. While the storm was brewing in the heavenly mandate realm, the other realms were also constantly in turmoil. During the uproar in the heavenly mandate city, there were people from other realms that had come to observe this storm. After the uproar in the heavenly mandate academy ended, the news rapidly swept throughout the 9 realms. The solar realm was like a huge fireball. The temperature was high. The scorching sun shone down on the land, causing it to be extremely hot. The solar realm was not suitable for ordinary people to dwell in. However, this place was heaven for cultivators who were proficient in the power of flames. The entire solar realm contained the scorching power of the sun. This power was naturally the strongest at the center of the solar realm, where Solar Divine Palace stood high above. Solar Divine Palace was truly erected in the sky above. Sun God Mountain stood tall and majestic, lifting this heavenly palace. This was where the sun rose and set. Right now, among the golden mist and clouds, inside the heavenly palace bathed in the flames of the sun god, many powerful cultivators appeared in one place. The place seemed to be a divine court. At the very top, a silhouette stood there with the sun behind him. They always hoped that they could one day restore the glory of their cultivators from various forces. Up until today, further away from where he stood were the cultivators of Solar Divine Comparison. Although there were no deities born from at the very top turned around, they could still be considered a force at the top of the world. A throne appeared back in the day, together with the silhouette wielding a scepter in his hand. There was also a force that bore sat down on the throne that was named as though he was a deity. Palace. Immediately, they hoped that in the original realm, gazes turned Solar Divine Palace could rise up again one day. Welcome, envoy of the sun. It was just that day had yet to come. Said as they bowed this was in respect. The origin of the Solar Divine Palace. They all knew the identity of this person. Hence, after the cultivator from the divine court descended upon the realm, even the palace lord of Solar Divine Palace, of the Solar Divine Palace, standing in front of the throne. Solar Divine Palace was originally even facing the envoy of the sun. The older generation was clearly aware of this. To him. However, similar to other forces, still felt that Solar Divine Palace also had a force. They even began to have their own ideas regarding how things should be. Diwu had extraordinary talent and believed that he would appeared among their Divine Palace. This was the origin of the Solar Divine Cultivators of the Solar Court from the Divine Prefecture had arrived. Among the legends of Solar Divine Palace into disarray. In the olden days, yet he could not resist. There was a deity known as the Sun God. His plane was still too weak. The light of the sun shone down on all living things. Stronger. If the Sun God got angry, the envoy of the sun sat up straight on the throne. As for the place that this supreme sun god previously resided in, he appeared extremely authoritative. Divine Palace. He said, "As the world heard about the sun god in the heavenly mandate realm, however, the crowd nodded their heads. Survived up to the present day. They already knew about the storm that occurred in the heavenly mandate realm. His descendants established the slightly sinister look in his eyes. He never imagined that Yi Futian was actually that powerful. Moreover, there was also Yusheng. They defeated even the cultivators of the Holy Land of Taichu in the upper realms. The current Heavenly Mandate Academy, as well as Yi Futian, could be considered to be the sun in the sky. The Void Realm is also the original realm. Before this, the appearance of the Dark Maiden caused the Dark Court to utilize hell to retrieve her. Now Yi Futian and Yusheng have also appeared. As expected of the original realm, I wonder whether there will be other surprises in the future. The envoy of the sun said. If that is the case, we need to take action immediately. Many cultivators narrowed their eyes. Take action? What were they going to do? The gaze of the envoy of the sun turned towards the palace lord of Solar Divine Palace as he asked. Have the members been gathered? They have. The palace lord of Solar Divine Palace replied as he nodded his head. Before this, the envoy of the sun had ordered him to gather all the cultivators of the Solar Divine Palace. From this, he knew that something was about to happen, and it would be a huge war. Then let's set out. The envoy of the sun got up and walked forward. The crowd of cultivators had yet to wrap their heads around what was happening. Set out. He seemed to have not said where they were setting out to. Hundreds of years ago, the solar realm only belonged to the solar court. Even now that hundreds of years have passed, of course, it is still the same, the envoy of the sun said. In the future, only one king is allowed in the solar realm. Solar Divine Palace will keep the various large forces in check. There can exist other various forces in the solar realm. However, they all need to declare the solar court as their king. His words caused the heart rates of the cultivators to increase. The envoy of the sun meant that they were preparing to clean out the various forces of the solar realm. There was going to be a huge cleansing. In the future, there could only be one ruling class force in the solar realm. There only needed to be one voice, and that voice would be that of the solar divine palace. Divine light shone down, and the group of cultivators set off. Qishao Divine Mountain was as usual. Many people were still training when suddenly, divine light shone down from the heavens above onto the divine mountain. The expressions of the cultivators of Qishao Divine Mountain immediately changed drastically. They all felt very overbearing auras. The next moment, it was as though various deities descended from the heavens. In the sky above, flames of the sun god rained down, seemingly wanting to destroy everything. Solar Divine Palace, what is the meaning of this? A huge voice cried out. Many top cultivators appeared at the peak of Qishao Divine Mountain. They were all looking up at the sky and questioning Solar Divine Palace. From this day forward, Qishao Divine Mountain is not allowed to rule over the solar realm. You must pledge allegiance to us and become a branch of Solar Divine Palace. Another voice traveled across the space, causing the hearts of countless cultivators on the entire Divine Mountain to beat faster. Solar Divine Palace wished to conquer the solar realm. It would not allow another force, which was at the same level, to contend with it. Qishao Divine Mountain knew that the world was going through a massive change, and the powers in the 9 realms would surely be reshuffled. However, they had not expected the change to occur so quickly and so intensely. The first force to stir up trouble was the Solar Divine Palace, and the first place they targeted was their Qishao Divine Mountain. On this day, countless people witnessed from a distance a destructive scene occurring at Qishao Divine Mountain of the solar realm. Rumor has it that a gigantic battle had erupted. In the end, Qishao Divine Mountain pledged their allegiance to Solar Divine Palace. After that, one by one, other forces in the solar realm pledged their allegiance to Solar Divine Palace. When others heard about the news, the entire solar realm went into an uproar. Gradually, the entire solar realm fell under the control of the Solar Divine Palace. A few days later, the leaders of the various large forces in the solar realm all gathered at Solar Divine Palace at the same time and held a grand event. However, they had not invited anyone from the other realms. From that moment forth, the solar realm was unified. Before this occurred in the solar realm, the Hidden Land realm was also in the same boat. Hell now ruled the Hidden Land realm. Another realm similar to these two was the Heavenly Mandate realm. The Heavenly Mandate Academy led the Heavenly Mandate realm. This model would completely sweep over the 9 realms very soon. The topmost forces from the outer realms unified individual realms. Such astonishing news very quickly spread throughout the 9 realms, stirring up a huge uproar. This storm was even worse than the one faced by the Heavenly Mandate Academy. This was a dramatic turn of events that truly swept the solar realm. In the Heavenly Mandate Academy, by the time Futian received news of this, it was already quite late. This was all within his predictions. It was just that he had not imagined that it would happen so quickly. It seemed that the force behind Solar Divine Palace was also sufficiently powerful enough to take down the entire solar realm in a short amount of time. In the Colloquy Palace, the atmosphere was somewhat solemn. Have you all heard the news? Lord Taishian asked. The crowd nodded. How could they not have heard such huge news? While we just received news of this incident, the Shadow Realm is now facing a similar situation. It is the same for all the other realms. Before Hell has yet to make a move, the forces of the Divine Prefecture are already preparing to divide up the 9 realms first. Lord Taishian continued. The Heavenly Mandate realm was originally one unit. This matter is barely related to us. Lord Taishian continued. However, if our alliance members Shangxiao Divine Palace, Nantian Divine Kingdom, Emperor Star Realms Do Tribe, Yuanyang Clan and other forces encounter such a situation, we will certainly rush to aid all of them. Each force has its representative here. I believe there are no objections. They had formed an alliance precisely to face the changes in the 3,000 realms of the Great Path. Now that the change had come, Some things naturally needed to be agreed upon beforehand. Since we are allies, that is naturally what we should do, someone said. Nantion Divine Kingdom has no objections, Nan Luotian replied. Do tribe agrees to this. Other voices continued to cry out. Everyone agreed with what Lord Taishian had said. Currently, the Heavenly Mandate Academy was already not the only force to have problems. In such a chaotic situation, they could only form groups and alliances to face the future changes ahead.